Hey everyone, I'm Stephanie, and I believe that all readers should read children's literature, especially adults. So that's what we do on the Kid Lit Love podcast. We celebrate all things children's literature, picture books, early readers, middle grade, and young adult novels too. Whether you're an adult reading to your inner child or connecting the young readers in your lives with fantastic books, you've come to the right place. Each week, we'll talk to a different children's literature author and discuss their books, their hopes and dreams for readers, their writing process, and much, much more. So, grab a notebook to build your TBR, and let's get to today's episode of Kid Lit Love. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Kid Lit Love podcast. I'm Stephanie, your Kid Lit loving host, welcoming you back to another weekly conversation with a children's literature author. Today, I'm talking with Monica Mancillas, author of multiple books like Mariana and Her Familia, How to Speak in Spanglish, one of my favorites, The Worry Balloon, and her newest book that we're talking about in depth today, the middle grade novel, Sing It Like Celia, a book that I said in my review, hijacked my heart. So Monica, welcome to the Kid Lit Love podcast. I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you so much for having me. It's such a pleasure to be here.
Yeah. And today, it's literally your release day for this book, which is so exciting. We are talking about the book on your book birthday. I feel like we have to cue the streamers and the confetti and the balloons. Such a wonderful day. I feel honored to share it with you. Even though we're not releasing it on your book birthday, it feels really special to be able to talk about it with you today.
Thank you. Well, likewise. I was saying earlier that I really couldn't, when my publicist asked when we should do this podcast, I was like, let's do it on release day. What a better way to celebrate.
Right. Oh, well, I feel I'm quite lucky to do that. So let's start with a little bit about you before we jump into your book. Can you tell listeners a little bit about who you are, especially your love of stories in all forms, and why you write?
Yeah. Well, I am first and foremost a mom. I have an 11-year-old daughter. I also teach piano to children. I obviously am gravitated towards kids. I always have been. I worked at a preschool when I was in college. So I really, I love kids, and I feel like kids are so plastic and flexible in they're so ready to absorb and learn and be positively influenced. So I've always loved to write, and I always imagined myself when I was younger writing novels and writing for the adult market. But once I had a kid of my own and I started writing, or I started reading all these amazing picture books and catching up on children's literature that I had missed out on when I was a kid, I really was drawn to the kidlit market and to the idea of being able to influence the world in some positive way through my writing. Prior to that, I was a musician, a singer-songwriter and recording artist. I moved to LA to work in the recording industry. So I worked in studios and around audio engineers and producers and recorded my own album. And so I was always a storyteller in one form or another.
I did not realize that, and it brings a new level of understanding to your middle grade novel because there is so much beautiful music and just the culture of music and what it can provide to us, certainly in terms of story and just who we are as people. I love that. It's all story, but it's in different modalities for you, it seems, and it blended together beautifully in the book.
Oh, thank you.
Exciting. I could never record a record or, I thought, we'll talk about the book, but I thought that she was just so brave being able to put her voice out there like that. And I thought, oh, that wouldn't be me, but maybe in a different way. But I love that you brought that piece of yourself to the book.
Yeah, well, and I also brought my own struggles with stage fright to the book because yeah, there's something really uniquely personal about lending your voice to the public. I don't know what it is. I mean, I can talk about my writing all day long and it's not a scary thing, but singing and sharing your own songs somehow is so personal. It really is like just putting a piece of your soul out there. And so um, it was kind of cathartic for me to work through the main character's stage fright in the book and just kind of relive all the moments that I went through, those moments of fear when I was a kid and
Yeah.
adult.
I was going to say, and adults. Sometimes we can get over it, but it pops up in new ways. And so it's always good to have role models of how to work through that. Well, let's talk about the book. In my words, right? I said that the book just hijacked my heart. It's beautiful, it's touching, it's moving, it's inspiring. It truly is all the things that I would love to see wrapped up in a middle grade novel. But I would love for you to tell listeners about it in your words, and then we can talk back and forth about some of the ways, that it impacted me as a reader, and some really um, some things I think that listeners would want to know about that would make them run and pick it up.
Well, thank you so much. First of all, I really appreciate those words of support. As a writer, you don't always get to interface with your readers. And so it's always really nice to hear positive feedback like that. So the book is about a 12-year-old girl named Salvadora Sanchez. Everyone calls her Salva for short. And it opens on the day that her mother disappears, and her mom has been a single mom for many years. And so is her entire world. And she doesn't know where her mother is gone. She winds up calling her dad, and her dad is a traveling investigative journalist. So he lives out of a camper van. So her entire world is upended, and she winds up having to live with her father while she's trying to figure out what happened to her mom. Is this her fault? All the things that we go through, even as children of divorce, the feelings of guilt and loss and confusion. And through all of this, her connection to her mom and also just her anchor to staying emotionally balanced is music. She loves salsa music, much like I do, and much like I did when I was her age. Celia Cruz is a big part of the book. Celia Cruz, for those who don't know, is known as the queen of salsa. And she's no longer with us, but she had a huge influence on the music industry and Latin music in particular. So yeah, the book follows Salva as she goes through this journey of both figuratively and literally finding her voice. She makes friends with a group of local kids in the campground she's staying in, and goes through some of the typical middle grade drama that we go through, finding new friends, finding new enemies, and learning to assert yourself and push back in those moments where it's appropriate.
Yeah, there's so much in this book in a good way. I think there is an entry point for just about every reader, right? Whether you are a middle grader yourself, if you just like to sing, or you love music, if you have some sort of complicated family relationship, you'll find yourself there. If you are trying to fight for an injustice that you see and you're trying to help, if you've ever tried to make friends, if you've ever been sad or anxious, or if you've ever found unexpected joy and happiness too, I feel like you have so many places where readers can find themselves wherever they are, that just gets you completely enamored and lost in this story. I found multiple places myself, right? And I'm an adult, but I did want to ask you, how did you do that? Because I'm always curious of how the story begins and how it develops, and if you set out with a certain purpose or intention in mind, or if all of these entry points just kind of came to be because that's how the story came to be, because they fit together so well. And so I just want to put that really big question out there of, How did you write a book that so many people will feel either seen or welcomed into so perfectly?
Oh, well, again, thank you. I want to like uh transcribe that and print it and put it on my wall. That was perfect. Yeah, I don't I don't know that I set out to address all of those different themes as I was writing the book. I think the simplest answer is that I myself am a complex person, and a lot of the experiences, a lot of my own experiences seeped into the book, whether I intended for them to be there or not. Um, the story started with a conversation with my editor, and we were just trying to come up with ideas for a contemporary middle grade novel. And she said, well, I noticed in your bio you mentioned that you used to be a salsa dancer, and I haven't seen that talked about in middle grade literature before. So I sat down with that, and just thought about that time in my life, and what was present in my life. I was a child of divorce. My parents separated when I was really young. My father was also an activist. So I was witness to a lot of social justice issues, and always grew up with a sense of wanting to be an
Mm.
activist myself. Um, Performing was a big part of my life, as I mentioned. I went to a school of performing arts. So I had a lot of friends who were in jazz band and in orchestra. And, a lot of my own friends were woven into this story, as well as my daughter's friends. They were actually, almost all of the main characters were named after people we know. So Maj is one of my daughter's best friends. Kazi is also one of her best friends. Miles was her first love in preschool, and they still go to school together. Um, so you don't necessarily, as a writer, I think, always intend for things. I mean, as I'm writing, new storylines will just crop up.
Yeah.
I didn't set out to talk about deportation or address immigration issues, but it's always been something that was a prevalent issue in the background of my own life. And so it just, when I had to come up with what Papi was investigating, it immediately was the first thing that came to mind. And yeah, it's fun when new characters will just throw themselves into your manuscript, because I did write a synopsis, and Betty was not, a lot of the characters, Betty and Theo, were not part
Oh, I
of the.
love Eddie.
I loved her too. And she was just your quintessential grandma that, I've known so many Bettys in my life. Amber was the other one that was a huge surprise. She just popped in out of nowhere and became this kind of symbol of of finding yourself and empowerment, and never had any intention of her being there. She just wrote herself in.
I love that. I love it. I'm just fascinated by the whole process of how that works, especially knowing that some of the characters that really jumped out to me maybe weren't planned all along and that they just wrote themselves in there clearly for a reason because readers need all of them, right? Not just the main characters, but all of them. And how special, how fun for your daughter to be able to see pieces of that in the book.
Oh yeah, she loved the book. She's an avid reader, but she's drawn, like a lot of kids these days, to graphic novels.
Mhm.
And so it's harder to get her to read a novel, but she just devoured this, and it was just the sweetest thing. She would come out in tears and go, "Mom, this is the best book." Now I take it with a grain of salt because she's my daughter, but we listened to the audio book on a recent road trip, and we were both just laughing at things that Miles would say. And just really, yeah, it was a lot of fun to see things that I had not even realized that I had put in that book, even having read it and revised it a million times. There were just, I don't know, you see it from a different standpoint when somebody else reads it to you. And I saw parts of myself that had seeped in that I didn't intentionally put in there. They just
Wow.
flowed in.
Wow. That's exciting. That must have been quite the experience of having those realizations hit you of, oh, wait a minute. Those were my words. And literally, if, as you're saying, people were kind of creeping into the story, so much more happened to be in there too.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, and little moments that I borrowed from life, like um the town is the town that she the campground that she winds up in is kind of uh a combination of a couple different places. We love to hike, my family, and so we've spent time hiking in Idlewild, which is a little mountain town about 2 hours away from where we live. And then we've spent a lot of time in the Sierras. And so in my mind, as I was writing this, the town looked like Idlewild, but the campground looked like Twin Lakes up in the Sierras. And when they go hiking up to the lake, that's one of the hikes we've done. The crawdads, that was something, a really special memory from our experiences. But again, you just write them, and then listening to them, I was going, oh my gosh, right. That's, you make all these
Yeah.
connections. It's cool.
Oh, I love it. And there are so many parts of the book, as I mentioned, where readers could likely see themselves or at least have an entry point into the book. It's a book that's real, right? The kids are real. It's often serious, yet funny, yet hanging around with friends, yet deeper conversations with other adults. There are so many different layers to it. And I think the one big piece towards the end of the book, and I don't like to give spoilers, so I have to kind of dance around it. But one of the big lessons, one of the big reminders for me, and I'm an adult, but I imagine this will shine through to the younger readers as well. As you mentioned, she's trying to find her voice, both the singing voice and the voice that tells others what she's feeling and what she's thinking and what she needs. And there are often places in the book where she's not feeling the greatest, right? There is anxiety, there is frustration at what's going on in her family that she doesn't know and she can't control. And the thing that helps is she, again, without giving spoilers, she realizes that by doing what she can for someone else to make them feel better, that in the process, she is feeling better and learning what she can control about her situation too. So I just love that reminder that to feel good, you can do good. And to feel better, you can work to make someone else's life better. And that just has this beautiful boomerang effect back on ourselves. That was just such a beautiful theme that jumped out to me.
Oh, thank you. And I hadn't thought about that in those exact terms before, but you're right. I think it's actually so important, and that was my big coping mechanism when I was a kid, was seeing, my parents struggling with all kinds of complex issues. I kind of became the caretaker, and I wouldn't necessarily recommend that to young readers. I think that's part of the reason that I did have Salva eventually, voice her feelings and push back against her parents and these people in her life um, that were upending her life without consideration to what she was going through. Um, so I wouldn't necessarily recommend that, but I do think that as a kid and as an adult, helping others, helping whenever I was that kid that whenever I saw somebody being picked on, I would stand up for them. And I wouldn't, if nobody wanted to sit next to that kid on the bus, I would sit next to them. I would sit with them at lunch. And it did give me a sense of control over my world when things at home were not going, amazingly for me. In those other environments, I had some control, and I could garner a sense of, like, as you said, garner a sense of joy from those moments of helping somebody else. But
Yeah.
I do want to say that, again, circling back to the fact that Salva learns to balance that, need to please others with standing up for herself and standing up for someone else. Um, I think that we don't teach kids that enough, to that it's okay to voice their emotions and voice their feelings, even if they make us uncomfortable. And I think in writing this story, I was able to rewrite my own story. My husband keeps telling me that it moved him a lot because he felt like I gave Salva the ending that he and I didn't have as kids. And I want kids to be able to read that and go, okay, it is okay for me to tell people that I'm angry about this, that I'm sad about this, that this is not okay, and still be worthy of love.
Yeah. What a beautiful idea to think that I love what you said about this story. Writing this story was almost kind of rewriting the version of yours. And because I am reading this book as an adult, I couldn't help but read it from the lens of a parent too. So, everything is primarily from the main character's point of view, but mom and dad do make a lot of decisions for her, as you said, that may not always be in her best interest, at least from her point of view. And it was just so interesting for me to read it as a parent because I'm getting the child's point of view. At the same time, I'm trying to understand those very big, again, no spoilers, but very, very big decisions that were made. And I just had this, contradiction of things going on in my mind of we do try to do our best, but sometimes the best isn't the match, that child needs. So I feel like there was a lot of beautiful complication in there that at the end, things don't magically get solved, but she does figure out a way to say how she feels and what she needs. And thankfully, parents respond. And that's all I'll say. So I don't reveal it, but middle grade readers will find themselves, but I think adults will have just as many entry points in given all that is going on in the story.
Yeah, that's always an interesting part of writing for children is seeing the response from parents.
Yeah.
So I'll have parents come up to me after reading one of my picture books and say, "Oh my gosh, I felt so seen reading this, and I had a grandmother like this when I was a kid, and I felt the same way." And um, I love being able to give visibility to not just kids, but to adults. And um, one of the things I think kids don't realize, and even those of us who are adult kids, we don't always realize that our parents are human. And especially when they're dealing with such hugely complicated issues, there isn't always a black and white right answer. And we can only do what we are equipped with, you know. That doesn't justify poor behavior, of course, on the part of a parent. But I think that there is a lot of gray area in this particular story. And yeah, if I were to ask the question of, well, how would I handle that? It's, it's a monster question. I don't know because I've never been in that exact position as a parent.
Right. And is exactly the reason I said the book hijacked my heart because my heart was all over the place in this book in such a good way. You've said on your website something that I loved, which is kind of related to your purpose of why you write, and it says, "Through words, I hope to change the world one reader at a time." Beautiful sentiment. Could you say more about what you hope for this book as well as all of your books in general?
Yeah, I am, I have moments where I question myself and, I'm not one of those authors that writes the light and fluffy, humorous book. I and I've tried to, and I think that I'm not necessarily the best person to do that. Some people are brilliant at it, and as I said, my own life has um, is complex. I had a very complex childhood, and like I think almost every kid I know, um, and I want to provide children with, as people have been using this a lot lately, but it's true. I really want to provide children with mirrors. When I was a kid, there were no books that had Latina kids like me. There were no books that talked about, or if there were, I didn't have access to them. But there weren't books that represented kids like me that were existing between two different cultures. And so I grew up always feeling not enough, not enough of a Mexican, not enough of an American, not, always struggling to figure out who I was and what made me enough of either one of those things. And you have to kind of fight back as you're growing up against media representation and stereotypes.
Mm-hmm.
So there was really no accurate representation of kids like me. And in being able to write these books, it's been really, again, cathartic for me to be able to write about those experiences, those particular experiences. And my hope is that kids that are like me or that come from marginalized backgrounds or that come from the immigrant experience will see themselves not only in the story, but in me as an author. When I go to a school, I try to encourage these kids as much as possible to follow whatever it is their dream is. It doesn't matter if it's to be an author or a doctor or a teacher or whatever it is. I really try to instill the idea in them that they can do anything they want to as long as they don't give up on themselves. And there are going to be a lot of voices from the outside world and internally that come in to tell them that they can't do this for a variety of reasons, and they need to be able to push past that. I also want to help change the world in some small measure by showing kids who maybe don't see themselves in that particular story. Well, let me rephrase that. They may not see elements of themselves. So maybe they've never, they don't know anything about the immigrant experience, or they don't know anything about deportation, or their parents aren't divorced. But I think in seeing themselves in other aspects of the story, that can be a way to cultivate empathy and compassion and understanding and tolerance. Because when we see ourselves in someone else's cultural experience, we go, okay, we're not that different actually from each other. There's a lot of universality in that experience. So yeah, I just hope that my books reach as many readers as possible and help in some way to shift the world in a positive way, especially right now as we are going through so much as a society, and kids are contending with so much and so much anxiety. And my books, as you know, address anxiety a lot as well. And so I really try to normalize the idea that we all go through anxiety, but there are ways through those anxieties, music being one of them.
Right. Yeah, I love what you said. I think, the gift of a book, and I've said on the podcast before, is the ability to be seen, but also to see, right? That empathy is so important. And I feel like when you read a book, any book, and you interact with it and you experience it and you connect with it, you can't undo that. You're literally changed by the book in one way or 100 ways, depending on the book and how it was matched to you. And I do believe that is the true gift of just being able to see yourself better, but also being able to look at the world and other people with a more empathetic, broader, connective lens. It's exactly what the world needs right now, is more books for people to be able to experience. And I think that is one of the reasons I loved your book so much, because there are so many opportunities that a reader would be able to do that.
Well, thank you. I certainly hope so.
Yeah. And I know that you have a few new projects on the way, at least coming soon. So I'm glad to hear about that. And even though it's your book birthday of one book, could you give us a little sneak peek into some that might be coming next?
Yeah, absolutely. I have a book coming out with Scholastic next year called Taco Tuesdays. And it's actually a complete departure from Sing It Like Celia, which I would say is more kind of literary. Um, it's a rom-com told in dual point of view, and it's featuring Julian and Dulcie, who start out as enemies and become something more when they crash into each other at Dulcie's Mexican restaurant. And they're both dealing with their own internal family struggles and kind of find themselves and each other through the story. It's fun.
It sounds fun. It sounds wonderful. And when is that one coming out?
Um, I don't know the exact publication date. I believe spring 2025 was the last I heard.
Okay.
And then I have a nonfiction middle grade book coming out through Chronicle in fall of 2025 called Leyendas, Legends. And I can't remember the entire title because it's really long. But basically it's a compendium of 60 biographies of notable Latina figures from all around Latin America and the United States.
I adore biographies. I love that. I think they are the best way to learn about the world, about the people in it, but especially I love when it's someone that I hadn't known yet that isn't out there, for everyone to know, because those are the biographies I love reading. So this one really excites me.
I definitely, in researching this and coming up with the list of people that we were going to work on for this book, it was really cool to discover, to mix in some of those classics that everybody knows of, like everyone knows Frida Kahlo, for example,
Right.
but bringing in, as you said, people that were not quite as known, they're not household names, and highlighting what they have brought to the world in some new way was really cool. And there's just a lot of diversity. I really wanted to push back again against the stereotypes that were fed in the media and culturally, against this idea that we're all a monolith and we're all the same. I wanted to show that we are different skin colors, different religions, different sexual orientations, and that we're capable of doing absolutely anything, from being an activist to an artist or a dancer, an astronaut, an inventor. So I'm excited for this book.
Oh, I am too. It's such a beautiful reminder that everybody has a story. And just because we don't know about it, because it's not the mainstream story, doesn't mean it is just as, if not more, powerful and compelling. Oh, wonderful. Gosh, it'll be a good year for you next year too.
Yeah, I'm excited. A lot coming up.
Well, wonderful. Well, thank you so much for coming on to talk about your newest book. Can you share where listeners can find you online to learn more about you and to grab your books?
Yes, the best place to find me is at monicamancillas.com, MonicaMancillas.com.
Okay. And I will make sure to put that along with links to the books that we've talked about today in the show notes so that it will be easy for everyone to click and grab.
Great. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much. And listeners, thank you so much for listening to another episode of the Kidlit Love podcast. And I'll see you next week for another. Thanks for listening to today's episode of the Kidlit Love podcast. You'll find links to all the books, resources, and ideas mentioned in the show notes at alitlife.com. And if you want more, you might like to listen to my other podcast called Get Literate. It's a podcast that explores all things books and reading, notebooks and writing, and everything in between to build a life you love. One more thing. If you love what you listened to today, please take a moment to rate and review the podcast or take a screenshot of the episode and text it to a bookish friend. This helps the podcast grow and builds our bookish community of kid lit love. Thanks for listening.